I never thought a single holiday could redraw the lines of my life so sharply, but that Thanksgiving did. I was 36, a single mother of two, already carrying more invisible scars than anyone at that table would ever bother to ask about. I had told myself after last year's humiliations that I wouldn't go back. I swore to myself that I'd stop chasing scraps of belonging. And yet, when my children asked if Grandma would remember their names this year, if Aunt Veronica's house would smell of cinnamon and turkey, the way they imagined Thanksgiving should I folded. I ironed a second-hand dress, smoothed my daughter's hair with trembling fingers, and told myself that maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. It never was. From the moment I stepped into Veronica's mansion, I knew exactly where I stood. The laughter from the living room wasn't meant for me. The way my mother barely looked up from her wine glass, how Blake, the perfect attorney husband, smirked at me like I'd wandered in by mistake, all of it carved the same message into my chest. I was an intruder in my own family. My daughter Ela, just 9 years old, carried the sweet potato pie we'd made together as if it were treasure. When she offered it to my mother, the reply came wrapped in velvet cruelty. "Oh, sweet potato, how quaint." And I felt my cheeks burn with the shame of having brought my children into this theater of rejection yet again. But the moment that seared itself into me forever came when Veronica handed me a stack of paper plates. Her smile was sharp, deliberate. "We're a little short on space," she said loudly enough for the room to hear. "So I set something up for you guys in the garage. You're used to scraps, right?" For a split second I thought it had to be a joke. But the silence that followed told me otherwise. Every head had turned. Every polished fork had stilled. And in that silence I realized there was no mistake. They had decided. I wasn't family, I was something less. So I took the plates. I led my children into the cold garage that smelled of oil and dust. Past the folding table shoved against the wall, past the crate and metal chairs that stood in for hospitality. I sat them down and I smiled as if it were nothing, though my chest ached so badly I thought I might collapse. Micah clenched his jaw, that quiet 12-year-old strength trembling under the weight of humiliation. Isla blinked back tears and whispered, "Did we do something bad?" And I had no answer that wouldn't tear us both apart. I told them no, that they had done nothing wrong. But inside I was screaming at my sister, at my mother, at myself. I had spent years begging for a place at their table, shrinking myself, swallowing my words, pretending gratitude for crumbs of affection. And still here we were eating on paper plates in a garage while laughter drifted through the walls. My children were learning for the first time what I had known all along, that in this family we would never be enough. Something broke inside me that night, not with noise or rage, but with a quiet finality. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to prove my worth to people who refused to see it. Still, I kept the mask on for my children's sake. I told them we'd go home soon, make hot chocolate, play Monopoly, and laugh the way real families did. I told them that what we had was enough even if I wasn't sure I believed it. And then just when I thought the night couldn't possibly hold more humiliation, it came the sound of tires rolling across the driveway. A black limousine. Not the kind of car that belonged on a suburban street, not on Thanksgiving. The house fell silent. I could see silhouettes crowding the windows' necks, craning hands, pulling back curtains. But the limo didn't stop at the front door. The driver turned toward the side gate, the headlights sweeping across the garage like a spotlight. My breath caught. Even the children froze, their half-eaten plates forgotten. The driver stepped out, crisp uniform gleaming under the porch light. He opened the back door with slow ceremony, and a woman emerged. Tall, elegant, wrapped in a navy coat that whispered wealth without needing to flaunt it. She didn't glance toward the front of the house. She didn't ask for Veronica or Blake. She walked directly toward us. And with every step I felt the air shift. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I'm looking for the owner of this house." I almost laughed, bitter and small. "That would be my sister. She's inside." The woman tilted her head, studying me with unsettling recognition. Then she smiled. "And you are Callie Rivers." She took a step closer. "You're exactly who I came to see." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My children pressed closer to me, their eyes wide with questions I didn't know how to answer. Who was this woman? How did she know my name? And why, after all these years of invisibility, was she here for me? Her words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to grasp but impossible to ignore. You're exactly who I came to see. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for someone, Veronica Blake, even my mother, to step in and laugh to tell me this was some cruel new game at my expense. But no one came. My sister and her polished guests pressed against the windows, watching like spectators at a play they hadn't paid for but couldn't look away from. I swallowed hard. Do I know you? My voice sounded thin even to me. The woman smiled. Not the brittle smile I was used to, but something warmer, familiar almost. My name is Margot Ellington. I'm the founder of Women Forward. We run outreach and mentorship programs across the state. She paused, studying me. About 5 years ago, you volunteered at one of our shelters. You wrote about it afterward, raw, honest pieces that struck me so deeply, I never forgot them. My knees nearly buckled. That part of my life had felt like a lifetime ago. Back when I'd just left my husband broke and terrified, crashing on a friend's couch with 2 children who deserved so much better. I had volunteered at that shelter because it was the only place where my brokenness felt useful. Late at night, after putting the kids to bed, I had written about those women, their struggles, their resilience, and posted them on a tiny blog with maybe 20 readers. I had assumed my words disappeared into the void. I've been following your writing ever since, Margot continued. You have a way of making people feel seen. We need that. We're putting together a speaker series for our national summit next spring. I want you as our opening keynote. And she paused as though weighing the gravity of what came next. We'd also like to offer you a publishing contract. Your story deserves to be told. For a moment, I thought I might faint. The garage seemed to tilt, the paper plate in my hand, suddenly ridiculous in its fragility. Me, a keynote speaker. A book contract, I who couldn't even secure a seat at my own family's table. I who had just been exiled to eat scraps with my children among boxes and gasoline fumes. Micah spoke first. Wait, you want her to speak? My mom? His voice cracked with something between disbelief and pride. Ela tugged at my sleeve. Because of her writing, Margot turned to them both and said softly, because your mother is extraordinary. Extraordinary. I hadn't heard that word used for me in my entire life. Potential, maybe, when I was younger. Hardworking, quiet, tired. Those were the labels I knew. But extraordinary. Through the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Veronica frozen in the dining room window. Her wine glass hovered mid-air, her mouth slightly open. Blake leaned close to her, his expression dark and unreadable. My mother's silhouette sat stiff and rigid at the end of the table, her face pressed tight with suspicion. They were watching this unfold, powerless to stop it. And for the first time, the weight shifted. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking. I turned back to Margot, my voice trembling. I don't know what to say. Say yes, she answered simply. She extended her hand, steady and sure. I hesitated only a second before placing my hand in hers. The moment our palms touched, something in me straightened like a backbone I'd hidden all these years suddenly found its place. My children pressed against my sides, wide-eyed, as if they knew they were watching their mother transform. Margot's eyes softened. We'll handle everything: travel, accommodations, childcare if you need it. What matters is your voice. It's time people hear it. Bull. I nodded, tears burning but refusing to fall. Yes, I'll do it. The garage was silent except for the sound of my children's breathing. Somewhere behind those curtains, my family was still watching. They had shoved me into the shadows, but now a limousine had arrived and pulled me into the light. Their silence for once wasn't power, it was defeat. Come, Margot said gently. We have dinner reservations downtown. Let's talk about the summit. Micah grabbed the leftover turkey like it was gold. Isla slipped her small hand into mine, her face glowing as if she'd just realized her mother was the main character in a story worth telling. We stepped out of the garage, past the stunned eyes at the window, past the golden dining room where I had never belonged. The November air cut cold against my face, but it felt like oxygen, sharp and clean. The limousine door opened, and for the first time in my life, I stepped into a space not meant for scraps, but for dignity. The seats were soft, the light warm. Isla whispered, Is this what it's like to be famous? I laughed a sound so unfamiliar it startled me. No, baby, I said. This is what it's like to be respected. As the car rolled away, I caught one last glimpse of Veronica's house in the side mirror. It looked smaller now, shrinking into insignificance. I realized I didn't need that table, that family's approval, or their scraps. I was building something bigger, something my children could stand tall beside. And for the first time, I felt free. The city lights glowed like 1,000 watchful eyes as the limousine carried us away from the house that had never felt like home. Inside, everything was hushed and warm, the kind of silence that didn't demand explanation. I sat back against the seat, the leather soft beneath my hands, and for the first time in years, I felt my body loosen, like the tension I'd carried for decades was slowly seeping out of me. Margot smiled at me with the patience of someone who had seen women in every stage of breaking and rebuilding. "You don't need to say anything right now," she said gently. "Just breathe. Tonight you don't owe anyone an explanation." That sentence lodged itself in my chest. I had lived my entire life explaining, apologizing, justifying. To my mother, who always reminded me how much better Veronica had done. To my ex-husband, who weaponized my mistakes and held them up like trophies. To employers, neighbors, strangers, who thought single mothers were cautionary tales. Even to my children, when I tried to shield them from the truth of why their father didn't come around. To sit here and be told I didn't have to explain, that was a kind of freedom I'd never known. Dinner downtown was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Crystal glasses, linen tablecloths, food that didn't taste like it came from a microwave. But none of it compared to the way Margot leaned in and listened. She asked about my writing, about the nights I stayed up past midnight typing on a secondhand laptop while the kids slept beside me. She asked how I balanced everything, rent, bills, fear, and still managed to keep hope alive. She even asked about Micah and Ela, and when they proudly shared their little stories, the pie Ela had baked, the journal Micah kept, she treated them like they mattered. No one had ever done that before. At one point I confessed, "I'm not sure I belong in the spotlight. I don't have the kind of story people want to hear. I'm just me." Margot shook her head firmly. "That's exactly why people need you. Not despite your story, because of it. People think inspiration comes from untouchable lives, from the perfect. But the truth is, it's the fighters in the shadows, the ones who keep showing up, even when no one sees them. That's where the courage is. That's what the world needs." I didn't cry then, though my throat burned with the effort. But something inside me began to untangle. For so long, I had believed the lie that my worth was conditional, that if I dressed better, earned more, impressed harder, maybe, then I'd earn a seat at the table. And yet here was a woman who saw me as I was, not dressed up for anyone, not playing small, and still she said I mattered. When the check came, Margot waved it away. "You've paid enough," she said softly. "Let us carry it from here." The ride back was quieter, but not the tense quiet of the garage. This was peace, the kind of silence that lets you breathe. Isla leaned her head against my shoulder, whispering, "I'm glad they put us in the garage." I looked down at her, startled. "You are why?" She smiled, sleepy but certain. "Because if they hadn't, the limo wouldn't have known where to find us." Her words struck like lightning. In her innocent wisdom, she had reframed the wound into something divine. Maybe the rejection wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Maybe being shoved aside wasn't punishment, but positioning. I kissed her forehead, whispering, "You're smart." "I get it from my mom," she murmured, and my heart cracked open wide. That night, after I tucked them both into bed, I sat in the dark and replayed everything. The humiliation, the paper plates, the woman in the navy coat, the offer that felt like a doorway I had never known existed. For the first time, I wondered if life had been waiting all along for me to stop begging for scraps, so it could hand me a feast. The months that followed moved quickly, yet every moment felt heavy with meaning. Margot's team called, emailed, set up meetings. Suddenly, my name was in inboxes and on contracts, not as Veronica's sister or Elaine's daughter, but as Callie Rivers. I was asked to tell my story, not in hushed tones, not in whispered apologies, but on a stage to hundreds of women. The keynote terrified me. I spent nights pacing the living room, scribbling drafts, ripping them up, starting again. But every time I wanted to shrink, I remembered the garage. I remembered Isla's small voice asking, "Did we do something bad?" I remembered Micah's jaw clenched tight with shame. And I knew this wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who had ever been told she didn't belong, every mother who had been made to feel invisible. When the day of the summit finally came, I stepped onto that stage with trembling hands, but my voice didn't shake. I told the truth about the garage, about my children, about years spent shrinking into corners, hoping for a sliver of acceptance. I told them how it felt to be handed scraps, and how it felt to finally realize I was never meant to survive on scraps at all. And as I spoke, I watched strangers in the audience nod through tears. I saw them see themselves in me. Women lined up afterwards, some whispering, some sobbing, all of them saying the same words, "That was me. Thank you." It was the first time in my life I felt at home in a room full of people. Not because of blood, not because of shared history, but because of truth. The book came after the summit like a tide that had been waiting years to break. Margot's team had whispered the possibility, but I never believed it until the day the contract appeared in my inbox, the subject line glowing like a beacon, "Your voice matters." When I held the first printed copy of More Than Scraps, my name in bold on the cover, I wept. I wasn't crying for the book itself, though it felt like a miracle. I was crying for every version of me that had stayed silent. Bent Small whispered thank you when given nothing. This wasn't just paper and ink. It was proof that I had existed, that my story had weight, that I had been more than the family garage all along. The money wasn't a windfall, but it was enough to ease the constant claw of fear in my chest. Rent wasn't a monster anymore. Groceries didn't feel like a gamble. For the first time, I could buy Micah new sneakers without calculating which bill could wait. But the real gift was the validation, the shift. The way people began to look at me not as someone less, but as someone whole. Micah started writing too. He never said it was because of me, but I saw it in the way he hunched over his notebook at night, pencil smudges staining his fingers. One evening, he read me a poem he'd written titled, "Chairs Don't Make the Table." His voice was quiet but steady, and I could feel the unspoken weight behind it, the memory of the garage, the ache of exclusion transformed into something beautiful. I swallowed my tears and told him the truth. "You're already a better writer than I was at your age." He smiled, a small, proud thing, and I knew healing was taking root in him too. Ela, still wide-eyed and unshaken in her belief that the world could be kind, asked if we could host Thanksgiving ourselves. "Just us and some friends," she said firmly. "No folding chairs, only couches and pillows. And warm food." Her voice was so insistent, like she was rewriting the rules in real time. And so we did. Our living room wasn't big, the table too small, but none of it mattered. People ate on laps on rugs with laughter spilling over like gravy. We lit candles, played music, passed food in mismatched bowls. No one glanced toward the door waiting for someone richer or shinier to arrive. No one asked why we weren't at Veronica's. We didn't even say her name. That morning, my mother had sent me a text. Just 2 lines. "Hope you're well. Miss you sometimes." I stared at it for a long while. Once it would have gutted me. Once I would have dropped everything, clung to it, tried to wedge myself back into her approval. But now I only typed back, "We're doing fine. Hope you are too." No venom, no ache, just peace. Because I finally understood that her love had always been conditional, and I was done living inside conditions. Here's what I know now, what the garage taught me. You can spend your whole life begging for a seat at someone else's table, waiting for them to notice you, to validate you, to save you. Or you can build your own table with your own hands, with whatever scraps you have, and watch as the right people show up with their own chairs, hungry for something real. The strange thing is, I don't hate my family anymore. The bitterness burned hot for a while, yes, but eventually it cooled into something steadier, clarity. They didn't break me that night. They revealed me. If Veronica hadn't sneered about scraps, if my mother hadn't turned her face away, I might still be begging at the edge of that table. It was their rejection that forced me to stop shrinking, to stop asking for permission to stand up. Sometimes when the house is quiet, I still think about the limo pulling into that driveway. about the way the curtains twitched, the way my family's faces pressed close to the glass. I wonder what they felt: confusion, jealousy, maybe fear. But the truth is, it doesn't matter anymore. Because I wasn't meant to be theirs. I was meant to be mine. And if you're listening to this, if you've ever been shoved aside, told you don't belong, handed scraps when you deserved a feast, hear me when I say you are not small. You are not invisible. You don't need their table. Build your own. Build it messy. Build it uneven. Build it with love. And trust me, one day the right people will come knocking, and you'll realize you were never waiting for them. They were waiting for you. So if this story touched something in you, if you've ever had your own garage moment where everything shifted, I want you to hold on to this truth. Rejection is not the end. Sometimes it's the beginning. If this story meant something to you, please give it a like. It helps more than you know. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you're new here, or if you felt something real in these words, subscribe to the channel. We tell stories that matter, and yours might be next. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been pushed aside, only to discover your strength on the other side of it? I read every one, and I'd love to hear yours. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, if they won't make space for you, build your own table.